Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 21st, 2022. I'm recording this on April 21st, 2023. As always, I gave you those dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. So as always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Those are the 2-week lists I've been using now for over 4 years, doing this look back to try to understand what books were hot back then and what books are moving in the market right now, how they've continued to respond 6 months after whatever news or whatever caused people to really chase those books. So we can all make better decisions about buying in the moment or being patient. In general, if you've been watching this list lately, everything has been down, down, down. Although the last few weeks we've started seeing a little bit of a stabilization, a little bit of return more to the mean of, 70, 20, 10, kind of down, steady, up. Well, after being just completely down for like months. This week is probably the best performing week we've had in quite a while. And interestingly enough, it's not necessarily some of the books you would think, but let's dig into the list and see what we can learn. All right. First up, we have The Return of Mark Hamill, #1. This was a promotional comic put out by Jack in the Box. Basically, I guess there's a story that was his first job and he failed miserably and got fired like this first day. So they were telling this story and they used it for an ad campaign and he did a couple of commercials for them. It cost raw copies for this book as it was coming out. We're going for $30. Now they're up to $40 to $55 for this. It's pretty hard to find. It was just a promotional thing on the Jack in the Box website. In addition, they didn't come in the best condition. So yeah, this one is definitely up and from what it was back then, and definitely a book that people are chasing after, particularly probably Star Wars fans. And maybe some Batman the Animated Series fans as well. Next, we have Resonant #1. This hit the list because it was optioned by BET. Back then, raw copies were going for $10 to $15. And now there's been no sales. No recent sales of this. Asking price starts at $8, so even though it's lower, there's no sales. This is definitely a down and a trap. Nobody's really interested in this. You can't really move this book right now. So yeah, that book is definitely not worked out despite having been optioned. Not a huge surprise. Next, our other option book of the week is Geiger #1. This was also optioned. Forgot to write down who optioned it. Raw copies back then were going for $10 to $15. 9.8 hit 100. Now it's a $1 to $10 book. 9.8, 25 to 90. Although most of those 9.8 sales are under 50. You could argue I should call this a trap. I'm calling it I'll be back. But yeah, it's borderline, definitely into the trap area. But the book is definitely down and a book that would have been worth being patient for sure. If you notice, there's no, what JP said 6 months ago, this was a week I did not do a cash or trash, so that's why there's no predictions for me listed on the bottom. Next, we're moving into our covers. Our first cover is Star Wars Visions #1 on the list for the 3rd week in a row. This NYCC variant, limited to 800. First 2 weeks, it was basically the same price, $75 to $90 on this. It had hit basically rotated lists. And yeah, it was doing, pretty well. Nothing too good, nothing, holding pretty well. But this time we got, instead of the second week peak I often talk about, we got a 3rd week peak. This book jumped all the way up to $300 after the 3rd week after NYCC. And yeah, that peak didn't hold. Whereas it was basically up worth it the last couple of weeks as we talked about it, or up straight cash at 90 to 175 now. The $300 raw copies, that's down in a dumpster fire compared to, what it's going for now. 9.8s are only 150 to 275, still down from those raw prices back then. So yeah, avoid those later. If a book is hot and then it peaks even higher in the 2nd or 3rd week, that's when you want to avoid trying to buy. Next, we have Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur #1, the new NYCC variant, the animation variant based on the cartoon that was getting ready to come out. Back then, raw copies were going for $110 to $150. Interestingly enough, this NYCC variant didn't hit the list until 3 weeks after the con, but it's there now. And this is another up and straight cash. This is an up and straight cash book. So our second one already. 150 to 225 now for raw copies of this. No 9.8 sales, no slab sales. A little surprised by that, but still going for big money. Still fairly frequent sales. Not a ton, but fairly frequent. Still a lot of interest in this particular book. All right. Next, we have Black Cat #1 from 2019. This is the J. Scott Campbell store variant, the variant B. He had like 5 or 6 different variants for this Black Cat #1. This variant B was a homage to ASM 601, the Mary Jane cover, limited to 2,500. And this thing back then, 9.8s were hitting 325. Hard to say what this one's doing. There's only been one recent 9.8 sale at 300. But raw copies are going anywhere from 150 to 350 for this book. Making me wish I'd pulled the trigger back when it was like a $75 book and I thought it was too much. Yeah, but this one, because to match with my 601, apparently lots of people want to do that. So this one is steady and worth it so far. You could argue, based on where the raw sales are going, that they're so close to that previous 9.8 sale that it's actually up. But we don't have a 9.8 sales to support that, so right now, we're just going to call it steady worth it for sure. This is a book that definitely has a lot of interest and goes for a lot of money. There's also a virgin version of this that came out later that was not part of the original sale on its website that came out later. I think it was a con variant or something. So there is that out there as well. Next, we have Miracle Man #1, the Peach Momoko 1 in 200. This is actually one of 2 connecting covers, but this is the one that they put on the list. This 1 in 200 was going for 300 plus back then. Now, 2 recent sales, both for 315, but the most recent of those was actually all the way back in February. So, steady and worth it based on the sale prices, but the book's not really moving. There aren't a ton of them on the market, listed, but there are a few, and it hasn't really moved since those February, January sales. So we're calling it steady worth it. You can maybe argue steady, I'll be back here. Just not enough sales data recently to really know where this book is at the moment. All right, our last cover of the week is Eternus #1, the Tihan Far 1 in 100 metal virgin variant. This hit the list almost 2 months ago when we talked about it. I looked back to find it. It was almost 2 months ago. This 1 in 100. Back then, it was going for, what does it say? Hang on. Like at 200. At this point, it hit the list again at 150. And this is another one that's had no sales. Listing prices start at 200 on this. So what do you call this? There's been no sales. The listing prices are more than what it sold for back then. So do you call it down? Do you call it a trap? Do you call it an I'll be back? I do definitely think it's definitely probably down. There's not a ton of interest in this. It's not continuing to move. But the few of them that are out there, people still want big money for. So with that, we're going to move into our little bit of comic buzz that we have this week. And we have Batman #6. What people chase is the first full appearance of the Court of Owls. They really appear in #4. This is just the better cover by far. So that's why people chase this one. But people have talked themselves into 4 as a cameo. Right now, back then, raw copies were going for 70 plus on this one. 9.8 going for 300. Based on the news that the Court of Owls were going to be part of the Batman Spawn crossover. They've been used a lot. They were part of the Gotham Knights video game. I know there's rumors that they're going to be part of the next Matt Reeves Batman movie. So there's a lot of rumors around the Court of Owls. It's caused this book to continue to hold pretty well. Right now, its raw copies are 40 to 80, 9.8, 3 to 500, which is a big range on those 9.8s. So I would call this one kind of steady and worth it. You can call it, really 9.8s are kind of up and straight cash. Raw copies are kind of steady, I'll be back maybe, or slightly down and I'll be back, because most of the sales are more in the 50, 60 range, but they do go all the way up to 80. So overall, we're going to kind of just call it steady worth. This book has been very valuable. It's still mostly in the same range. You can maybe do a little better on the 9.8s than you could back then. You could maybe not do quite as well on the raw copies. But yeah. All right, next we have Batman 666, the first appearance of Damian as a future of Damian as Batman. But this is also the first cameo appearance of Professor Pig, which is why it was hitting the list. Well, actually, there were a couple of reasons why. One is this Damian, and an image of Damian in this costume showed up in Batman versus Robin, the comic, but also we got news that Professor Pig was a potential villain also for the Matt Reeves Batman 2 movie. So that's why this was kind of hitting the list. Back then, raw copies were going 30 to 40, 9.8, 150 to 200. Now it's a $30 to $60 book, 9.8, 150 to 300. So another kind of up and worth it. So again, covering the same range, but the high sales are a little higher. That's really what we think of when we think of an up and worth it. So yeah, this is a lot of people were interested in this book and still are. Next, we have Batman and Robin #1, the first full appearance of Professor Pig, or maybe the first appearance of him and actually the main continuity in terms of that was kind of a possible future that he appeared in that other book, and now this is him in the main universe or the main timeline. Back then, raw copies were going for 8, 9.8, 100. So clearly not as many people chasing that as they're chasing that other book, but it does have kind of the dual key thing on that other book. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, 9.8, 1 to 150. So again, kind of steady, kind of worth it. So yeah, we see several of these books are kind of holding their own, holding in the same range that they were back then, a lot more so than we've seen most of the time lately. Next, we have Shazam, #28, the second appearance of Black Adam, the first appearance since the Golden Age. Back then, this is one of those, you can't really trust the values on the raw side. Tom, this is their average was $685 on this book, with a 9.6 going for $1878. There's no way raw copies were averaging $700 if 9.6s were going for $1,800. Now what you can find is raw copies are $25 to $200. And 9.6s are down, but not as far as you would think, given that the movie didn't do all that well. It's still a $1,500 to $1,600 book. So still a lot of interest in this book and in this character. The movie has not hit this book as bad as what you might have thought, just because it didn't perform that well. And we know we're not getting The Rock anymore as Black Adam. With James Gunn coming on and all that kind of stuff, you might have thought you got a bigger drop. We have not seen it. So it is down, but it's just kind of an I'll be back and not a crash in prices on this one. With that, we're going to move into the MCU, and we got a bunch of MCU-related books this week to talk about. First up, we have Daredevil #32 from 2013. First appearance of the new version of the Legion of Monsters. So we've had the first Legion of Monsters show up on here before. So this was a new team. Didn't even know. So that's why this book was hitting the list following the Werewolf by Night special. I was like, oh, maybe this is the version they'll get. Anyway, so people thinking we're going to continue to get more monster side of things with Blade coming and that kind of stuff. Back then, raw copies were going for 15. Now, raw copies are 5 to 20. So again, kind of steady in the same range. A little bit of an I'll be back, as you can probably get $10 or whatever. But there's definitely still $15, $20 sales going on. So we'll still call it steady and an I'll be back. On just the I'll be back side of steady. All right, next. A book that's never hit the list. There's never been any spec on, not at all, or any spec that didn't pay off. And that is Silver Surfer 3, the first appearance of Mephisto. Yes, I'm being sarcastic there. This book has been on the list many times. People have been specking that Mephisto was coming constantly. Back then, raw copies were going, well, there's another one because I didn't do a cash or trash that week. I don't have actual values for raw copies. The average, according to Tom, back then was $2,800, but they're factoring in all the slab sales, the raw sales, when they do it like this on an older book. 9.6 went for $7,500. That tells you there's no way average sales were $2,800, but in terms of raw copies or anything like that. Raw copies now are $100 to $400. 9.6, $6,600 to $6,900. So not down a little bit, under $7,000. But still kind of an I'll be back. And this was all based on back then rumors. The Sacha Baron Cohen rumors were going again back then. They've happened a couple times since. People think that's where they're going with Mephisto. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. Next, we have Jungle Action #6, first appearance of Killmonger. This hit the list because there were rumors that he was going to appear in Black Panther 2, not as that he was going to take over the role. People kind of moved past that by this point, but there were rumors he was going to appear like as a spirit, like in the spirit realm, like T'Challa's dad did in the first movie. If you have seen it, mild spoilers, you know whether or not, well, I won't do the spoilers. If you've seen it, you know whether or not that's true. But back then, raw copies were going for 180, 8.5, going for 504. Again, I wonder if that raw copy is a little high, but now raw copies will cost you 40 to 115. 8.5 will cost you 3 to 350. So this is down in a trap anyway. It's definitely backed up quite a bit following that. It's pretty much confirmed based on what we do know now at this point that we're not getting more Killmonger, at least in a major role in the MCU, without some sort of reboot kind of thing. Next, we get Daredevil number 28. This is the first Kingpin as the mayor. This is where he becomes the mayor of, I guess, all of New York. I don't think it's just Hell's Kitchen. I think it's all of New York. Becomes the mayor of New York in the comics. And this was hitting the list because it was a rumor that this was going to be a possible storyline for Daredevil Born Again, the TV show that's coming. Back then, raw copies were only going $3 to $10. There were no, according to Tom, there were no slabs on the census at that point. Now it's a $10 to $30 book. So people have decided that they are speccing on this and they're going to continue to pay on this. Even though storyline books generally don't do very well, this is, at least for this 6-month period, this is an up and straight cash book. We will see what happens once the show comes and goes, but we're almost a year out from that. So we got a while. Actually, we're still more than a year out, I think. So yeah, we got a while before we actually see that. But yeah, to this point, it has been an up and straight cash book. So yeah, Daredevil 28, first Kingpin as mayor, is up in straight cash, whereas Jungle Action 6 and Silver Surfer 3 are down. That's just the nature of the spec market. Next, we have Hulk number 1 from 2008, the first cover appearance of Red Hulk. I think it's important to remember he does appear on this cover, which is cool, but he does not appear in this book. He doesn't appear till issue 2, actually inside the book. But this is the book everyone wants for Red Hulk. Raw copies back then were $80, 9.8s were $325. Now raw copies are 40 to 70, 9.8s $3 to $350. This is one of those, I went back and forth. Is this a down and I'll be back, or a steady I'll be back? I ended up putting down because most of the sales are on the raw side, and most of the sales are more in the $40, $50, $60 range from that 80 as opposed to the 70, the upper end. So yeah, I think we're going to put it as a down and I'll be back. It's marginally, you could have said steady, I'll be back right here. Maybe on some of the others were maybe just as steady as, this is just as steady as some of the ones I did call. Sometimes it's hard to make that split, but yeah, it's definitely backed up just slightly on the raw side. Pretty steady, very steady on the 9.8 side for this one currently, because we still don't know for sure we're getting Red Hulk, but most people expect we will get him in the Thunderbolts movie. Next, we have Scar, Son of Hulk, number 1, the first Scar solo title. And this had hit the list a month plus ago when She-Hulk started coming out. Now, at this point, we were after his appearance at the end of the show. So the book was still hitting the list, though. Raw copies back then were going for $20, 9.8, $340. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, 9.8, $175. This is definitely a trap. Not a lot of enthusiasm for Scar post-appearance. My guess is they make him look a little more tougher when he shows back up. But yeah, people were not happy with the way he appeared. And yeah, this book is backed up because of it. But then again, every character that's appeared in these shows is backed up. So maybe it has nothing to do with how much they like the appearance. Next, we have What If Planet Hulk number 1, the first appearance of Scar. Back then, raw copies on this one were going for $100. 9.8 was going for $625. Now it's a $15 to $60 book. 9.8, $225 to $275. Yeah, that's a dumpster fire. I know people are going to probably blame it on the quality of the appearance we got, but this has been a consistent pattern for all the characters that have appeared recently in the MCU stuff. But as soon as the appearance is over with, interest is lost and these books come crashing down. And really, how many people cared about Scar beforehand? Not a ton. So that is the 19 books on this week's list. Like I said, we actually still had several books that went up, several books that were steady, and you maybe could have argued for another one, maybe 2 that I should have called maybe steady instead of down. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.